Okay, so this is what the data set looks like that we just downloaded. And this data set is called a panel. So in statistics or econometrics, we always distinguish different kinds of data sets, and specifically there's a cross-sectional data set, and then there is a time series, and there's a panel. So this one is a panel. A panel has different cross-sectional units. So the cross-sectional units here are the countries. But then each country has various observations over time. So whenever you have various units of observations like countries, and for each unit of observation, various observations over time, then this is a panel. A time series is if you have only one unit of observation, but many observations over time. And a cross-section is a data set where you have many different units of observation, but each unit of observation has only one observation per variable. So what I want to do now is I want to convert this data set into a cross-section by taking for each series the average over the 5 years, because we can see, for example, here GDP per capita, maybe I first fit to content. So you see for Angola, for example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of observations over time for GDP per capita and also fertility rates. So what I want to do is for each variable, I want to just take the 5-year average. Why do I want to do that? Because you can see, sometimes we have here missing observations, and sometimes you may have only one observation or so. Like here you have none. But anyhow, so this will make sure that we get lots of observations if we have at least one observation within the 5-year period. But before we want to do that, I want to add another column, and I add the region, because as you remember, we wanted to compare Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean. So the first observations that we downloaded, like in the previous video, we pulled up only the countries from Sub-Saharan Africa. And you see we have Angola, Benin, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde. Those are all the Sub-Saharan African countries, and I label them SSA. And so now soon we should hit, so Zimbabwe is over the last one, and beginning with Antigua and Barbuda, those are the Latin American and Caribbean countries. So I copy down that SSA, Control D. So Control D is copied down. And now beginning with Latin America and the Caribbean, beginning with Antigua and Barbuda, we have the Latin American countries. And again, I copy now down LAC. Okay, so now we have the region. So how do I convert this panel into a cross-section? By taking for all the indicators the 5-year average. And again, this is a great case for the use of a pivot table. So I highlight the entire data set. Then we go to Insert Pivot Table from Table Range. Okay. And so what I want to do is I want to put the country into, that's already done if you click on it, It goes into the row. So now we have all the countries in the rows. And into the columns, I want our two series. So we have two series, GDP per capita and the fertility rate. But I don't want that in the rows, but in the columns. Now I have the fertility rate and GDP per capita. And I want the values in values. And you can see by default it says 5, but this is the count. And what I want to do is I want to change this count to the average. Okay. So now this is a cross section. For each country I have now only one unit of observation for fertility rate and GDP per capita. Okay, but we still need to clean up that data set a little bit. So what I do in the next step, I'll just clean up this data set. And I don't need a grand total, so I copy that and I copy that into a new sheet. And I just copy the values. Okay. So now all those observations that you see are 5-year averages from 2020 to 2024. But you see, we still have some observations like British Virgin Islands. We didn't have a single observation. So then Excel returns a divide by 0, means it couldn't calculate the average. So what I want to do is I want to eliminate all those observations. So I can do that manually by clicking on each and just deleting that. But what's a little bit faster is we highlight the data set and now we sort by the column with the fertility rate. So we go to data, sort by fertility, actually GDP per capita, smallest to largest, and make sure you have highlighted my data has headers, GDP per capita. And now if we sort, that will push down all the observations where we have here, divide by 0. So let's see. Okay. So we don't have any data for Cuba, Eritrea, South Sudan, and St. Martin and Venezuela. Okay, so let's delete these. And the last thing I want to do is I want to add again the region. So I insert another column with the region. And now you can see that when we use the pivot table, Excel sorted everything differently. And actually, yeah. So you see now there's, for example, Honduras and Cote d'Ivoire, and then Ghana, and then Nicaragua. So now we don't have any more like the first block, Sub-Saharan African countries, and then the Latin American and Caribbean ones. So now what I need to do is I need to find again the region which I have added already to into that data column. So next to Angola I have here Sub-Saharan Africa, so that's in the column data. So now what I do is I pulled it up, and for that purpose I use the VLOOKUP formula. So I say equals VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup. So now I want to look up Burundi. Then where do you want to look it up? Well, I want to look it up in the sheet data, and specifically in this array. but I highlight the array up to the region. Okay. And then what I also do is I put little dollar signs around by pressing F4, and that will put those little dollar signs in front, and that will fix the array, because when I copy down the formula later with the VLOOKUP formula, I want that VLOOKUP array to stay fixed. Okay, so now I told Excel, look up, for example, Burundi in that fixed array, and if you find it in the first column, I actually want the third column. So that is what Excel do. You highlight the array and Excel will find the lookup value, like Burundi, in the first column. But then since I highlighted 3 columns, I want Excel to give me the value in the third column, because that is where I have the region. And then you still have to conclude that Excel formula with false, meaning that if Excel doesn't find, for example, Burundi, then return, it's not there. If you wrote true, Excel will come up with a value which is similar to Burundi, maybe, I don't know, Botswana or Bermuda. Almost always you want to conclude that VLOOKUP formula with a false. Okay, so now we should see SSA. And we don't, so what mistake did we do? So we look up A2, look it up in data. Okay, so I don't know, let's do it again. So equals VLOOKUP. Look up this one, comma, then where? Look it up in this array. Okay, comma, then don't forget to fix that array. Press F4. Okay, if you find it in that array, please return the third column, otherwise it is false. So now okay, I made a mistake, but so it is SSA, and now I can copy down that formula. And okay, so now we have a complete data set, and because I have here a formula, when I save the file, that will take up a lot of memory, so I remove the formula. So I just highlight the entire data set, Control A. Now I go with my mouse somewhere and maybe right click, and then what I want to do is I want to paste special what I just highlighted. So I press Control Copy, now right click, paste options, you go to that 1, 2, 3 and it says values, and now if I escape it, you see there is no formula anymore. It's just a value. Okay, so now this is our data set. Maybe we don't call it the first column row labels, but maybe country. Make it a little bit nicer, maybe make that bold. And what I also want to do is I don't really need all those decimals. Let's say I only want 1 decimal point. So I create new columns, and I abbreviate it like third, and GDP per capita. In economics, economists like to abbreviate that with Y. And we can spell it out, fertility. Okay, but now I only want everything with 1 decimal point. I don't want all those decimal points. So the Excel formula for that would be, for example, round. So now we round this value to 1 digit. Okay, so that is probably 5.0. Okay, and we do the same for y, and you see I can now copy that formula to the right. I do that by pressing Shift arrow right, and now I want to copy that formula to the right, and that is Control R. Okay, now we get 1037, and now I can copy down that formula, so I go to the end, to the last row, using Control and the arrow keys. I go 1 to the right. Now I add Shift arrow right. Now I add Control arrow up, Control D, copy down, and again I want to remove the formula because there's everywhere a formula in there. I remove the formula by pressing Control A, that highlights everything, copy it. Now I right click and paste special values over itself. Okay, so now we have a data set, and we will use this data set beginning with the next video in order to do some visual descriptive statistics for quantitative data. So both fertility rate and GDP per capita, it's obviously ratio scale data. Most of the quantitative variables in economics is ratio scale. And anyhow, so we will start working on that one in the next video.